Priti Patel has arrived back in London after she was summoned back from a trip to Uganda by the Prime Minister. The family of Carl Sargent, the Welsh Assembly member found dead yesterday in the wake of harassment claims, say he was denied justice. And the Health Service urgently needs the cash injection it was promised during the EU referendum, according to the boss of NHS England. Well, rumours of Priti Patel's sacking today only add to the sense of turmoil within the Conservative Party. If she goes, she'll become the second cabinet member to lose their job in a week. And Westminster watchers say the future of others, including Boris Johnson and Damien Green, still hang in the balance. When the last half an hour, the Home Secretary Amber Rudd, who is currently on a visit to Washington, was asked what she thinks of Priti Patel's future.
Priti Patel, do you think she should resign?
I'm going to leave it all up to the Prime Minister. Thank you very much.
Do you agree with her decision to take 12 Israeli meetings?
So, with Britain heading into another round of divorce negotiations in Brussels tomorrow, can this weakened minority government limp on? Well, joining me to discuss this are Sonia Sodha, former advisor to Ed Miliband, and now chief leader writer at The Observer, and political commentator at The Mail on Sunday, Dan Hodges. Sonia, Dan, good to see you both. Sonia, if I can firstly start with you, can Theresa May's government limp on?
It can, and I think it will, because I think although we're seeing a series of crises that would bring down would have brought down several governments, actually, I think the thing about Theresa May and where she is that she's incredibly weak. She lacks a majority, but the one thing that unites her very divided party is fear of a Corbyn government. And the very last thing that Tory MPs want at the moment is to risk rocking the boat by causing a leadership election, potentially causing a Conservative leadership election, potentially causing a general election that looks increasingly likely to deliver Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister. So I think she's a Prime Minister in crisis. I think the government looks like it's in complete and utter stasis, complete meltdown. Nothing's getting done. There's a lot coming up. A lot of progress needs to be made. But I think we are going to see this government continue to limp on, not being able to achieve very much, but being held in place by fear of a Jeremy Corbyn government.
Dan, so Sonia's saying the Prime Minister's not going anywhere for the time being?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure about that, actually. I mean, if we'd been having this conversation about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I would agree with Sonia, but I just think Theresa May has been staggering from crisis to crisis. And actually, if you recall where we were after her disastrous party conference speech, that the narrative in Westminster, and speaking to Conservative MPs, what they were saying was she is one crisis from being forced out of office. Well, I mean, since then we've had about half a dozen crises, and it looks like we're going to have half a dozen other crises coming up. And I think the common thread, I mean, you touched on some of the issues that were confronting the government, and some of the sort of the ministerial issues that were confronting Theresa May. The common thread that links them all actually is Theresa May herself and her inability to get to grips with these various issues, and her inability to get to exert her authority over her own cabinet. And there comes a point with these sorts of crises and these sorts of political vacuums where MPs who were formerly saying, you know, we don't have anyone better, suddenly start saying, well, we can't do any worse. And I think we are fast approaching that point now. I think there is a possibility if Theresa May were to have a sort of a wide-ranging reshuffle that possibly could buy her a bit more time. But certainly speaking to MPs and speaking to ministers, there is an increasing view now that Theresa May has lost control of her government and they can't really see how she can get a grip of her government.
Sonia, on the issue of a cabinet's reshuffle, Anna Soubry, Conservative MP, said earlier on that she believes that Theresa May needs to do a thorough cabinet's reshuffle in order to reassert her position. Would that work? Would that help her?
I think, as Dan said, yes, it would help a bit. I think the fact that she's taken so long she hasn't even sacked Priti Patel yet, but that's looking increasingly likely. The fact that it's taken 24 hours, the fact that you have a sense that she's a Prime Minister that's really dragging her feet, does contribute to this perception that this is a government in crisis. And I think it's a mistake for her to sort of step back from asserting her authority. She may well feel that she's too weak to shuffle things around, to really shake things up. But I mean, I think the question is what she got to lose. And I think actually if she did sort of defy perception and really moved people around quite a lot, that would send a signal that she's perhaps a bit stronger than we think. But I think she's got a lot to think about, and it's not just about who's in and who's out, who's in political favour and who isn't. She's got to get a very fine balance between people who supported remaining in the European Union and people who supported Brexit in her cabinet. A lot of thought went into that. If Priti Patel is gone by the end of the day, as I think most of Westminster is expecting, she's going to have somebody who's a very fervent supporter of Leave on the backbenches, causing trouble, and she's going to have to look for somebody else, I think, who supported Leave to replace her.
Dan, can Priti Patel survive this? And if she does get sacked, why not sack Boris Johnson?
Well, on the first of those, I mean, I would say categorically no. But as we've seen this crisis unfold, I mean, and you know, obviously we've had the incredible spectacle of Priti Patel essentially being sacked in slow motion. I mean, who knows? I mean, you know, it wouldn't surprise me actually if after all this, you know, Priti Patel walked out of Downing Street and Theresa May said, actually, do you know what? I'll let you off. I mean, this is how badly this has been handled. I mean, you put your finger on it though. I mean, we've got Boris Johnson sitting there, who is obviously in his own problems. I mean, some people may argue that Boris Johnson's blunders and indeed sort of political crimes over the last week, you know, exceed those of Priti Patel's. He is inextricably bound up in her crisis. But I mean, I think you know, Sonia's put her finger on the problem. You know, behind everything, of course, as ever, everything, all roads lead back to Brexit. And the problem that Theresa May has is how she retains the political balance within her cabinet. Were she to sack Priti Patel, were she to sack Boris, that would be seen as shifting the balance within the cabinet in favour of the Remainers. So she would have to find a way, were she to do that, of balancing that out. And again, it's quite difficult to see how she can do that at the moment.
Sonia?
Well, I think Boris Johnson, if he's got any sense, he'll be feeling pretty lucky at the moment. Boris Johnson committed a completely different sort of blunder to Priti Patel, but a very, very serious one. His comments this week, which he's yet to admit were wrong, could see a British Iranian citizen who's being held in an Iranian jail see her sentence increased. And I think Theresa May, can ill afford to lose Priti Patel, but arguably she can even more ill afford to lose Boris Johnson from her cabinet in terms of the signal that would send. And I think she will be hoping that if she does indeed dismiss Priti Patel today, that will sort of deflect from Boris Johnson. So if I were Boris Johnson, I'd be feeling pretty fortunate that one of my colleagues has committed a blunder that detracts from me.
Okay, Sonia, Dan, good to see you both. Thanks to you both for your time. Now more on the